The first time I heard Isfahan, it floored me. It's smooth, elegant, emotional, and tasteful, like saying something without needing to be said. And at the heart of this performance, what feels and is timeless is the star performer, Johnny Hodges. But there's a great story behind this piece, a world tour, and the last great collaboration between Billy Strayhorn and Duke Ellington. In this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of the backstory and why Johnny Hodges' performance hit so hard, musically, emotionally, and everything in between. So let's dig in. Here's the setup. It's 1963. Duke Ellington and his orchestra have been asked to go on a 3-month tour with the United States Department. What was the reason for the tour? Well, the reason for the tour is that they wanted to use Duke Ellington's artistry and music as a sort of cultural diplomacy. The tour took them all over. They played in Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, what was then Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, Lebanon, and Turkey, and finally Iran. The plan was to continue on to Egypt, Cyprus, and Greece, but then everything stopped. News broke that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated, and the tour was immediately cut short. The band flew back to a grieving country. But that experience, seeing the cities, meeting the people, smelling the aromas, hearing the sounds, had left a major impression on them, especially Ellington and Strayhorn. They didn't just try to copy the sounds that they heard, but they tried to soak it in. Here's a quote of what Ellington meant by soaking it in. "It's more valuable to have absorbed while there. You let it roll around, undergo a chemical change, and then seep out on paper in the form that will suit the musicians who are going to play it." A few years later, that chemical change became the Far East Suite, a collection of 9 pieces, inspired by the places they've seen, the emotions they felt, and the stories that they carried with them. And the ballad at the heart of that suite was Isfahan. So here's an interesting fact I learned while doing research for this video. The tune Isfahan was actually written before their tour, and it had a completely different name. That name was called Elf. It was a tune that Billy Strayhorn had written recently, and it was just a tune in his backlog. But they drew it back out, and they renamed it after their experience from one of the cities that they visited, which was Isfahan. When they visited the city of Isfahan, it made a huge impression on Ellington. He described it as a place where everything is poetry. They meet you at the airport with poetry, and you go away with poetry. And that stuck. When they later put together the Far East Suite, they revisited that tune Elf and renamed it Isfahan, turning the tune into a kind of musical postcard for the city. What's amazing is how well the name fits the city, even though the melody had been written previously. It's elegant. It's smooth. It's just sophistication. And this tune was specifically written for one player in mind, Johnny Hodges. And the way we know this is looking at this manuscript. The top left corner, you can see a shorthand note, Rab, short for Rabbit, which was Johnny Hodges' nickname. So we know when this tune was written that Billy Strayhorn had Johnny Hodges in mind to perform this tune. Now, let's break down the tune and some of the techniques Johnny Hodges uses to really add an extra flair to the sound of Isfahan. Now, let's just listen to how he just starts the beginning of Isfahan. I mean, just that first little phrase right there. He really sets the vibe of the tune. How light and relaxed it's going to be. He even delays that first half step down right at the bottom of the phrase. Just listen for that. Listen to how he delays it. He doesn't go ba-ba-ba-da-boo like the rest of the melody. He takes a little like slight rubato. Let's listen to that one more time. You hear how he delays that? Bow, bow. He really lets that sit, and then the band comes in. I mean, just amazing. Now, let's talk about the 5 different techniques he really uses to embellish this melody. You know, when you look at a melody, a lot of times it's just notes on a page. And so you, as the artist, need to find a way to embellish it. And Johnny Hodges is just the king of embellishing things just right. So let's talk about his tone. What about is he doing with his tone? On the lower register and even in the mid register, he's kind of sticking to a subtone sound. Let's take a listen to how he's using that subtone. You hear that airiness. You hear it's not just a straight tone. There's that kind of like fuzz, that little smoke on the edge of the tone. Like listen for that. You hear how he holds that note and there's that subtone? Let me grab my saxophone so that you can see, for example, of what I mean. So, the subtone sound, when he lands on that note. You hear that slight airiness? If I were to play it a straight tone, you wouldn't hear that airy sound in it. It would be more like this. You hear the difference of the subtone versus the straight tone? In this tune, he's constantly moving in between, using the softer subtleties as the subtone, and then when he really wants to sing it out, as the straight tone. When he gets to the end of that phrase, versus if it was a straight tone, it would be. You hear the difference? It's a very subtle difference, but it's that subtone versus the straight tone sound. See, there it is again, just. So that's the technique he uses a lot. When he's playing softer and wants to play with a smoother, subtler sound, he uses subtone as a technique. Now, let's hear him when he uses a straight tone sound. You hear how much more forceful it is? And it's definitely, he's using that to change the dynamic. So my bad, mess up note. But he's not just using, because if he was using a subtone sound, it'd be like this. But he's more straight tone. So that's a technique he uses. I would say a majority of this tune, he's more than likely in subtone. He is keeping it subtle, not being overt with his tone, but keeping it very, very subtle. So overall, the subtone sound is what he's using for a majority of this tune, but when he's trying to project more, be a little at the top, more of a forte dynamic, he's using more of a straight tone. So that's the first technique that Johnny Hodges is using in this tune. Now the second technique is his use of vibrato and how he chooses to use that vibrato. So there's different times where he may use vibrato and he may not use vibrato. Like listen at the beginning of the tune, after he plays the initial line, when he goes up, no vibrato at all. He's not using that any sort of bit. Let's listen for that. And now he's using a faster vibrato. So he's not just using vibrato the whole time. It's not just. He's using straight tone. So he's not just straight up using vibrato at the beginning of the note, like say in different classical type pieces, or even more of a very old school, earlier sound for saxophone, but he's being decisive of when he wants to use that vibrato. So deciding on where and what notes you want to do vibrato on is another tool that he uses to accentuate certain notes, either using a little bit of a wider, slower vibrato or a faster, narrower vibrato. So that first phrase he uses a little bit of a slower, wider vibrato, but then that one he uses a little bit of a faster vibrato. So that's a technique he kind of plays with throughout this tune of slower, wider vibrato and a quicker, smaller vibrato. The next technique he uses is finger falls, where he doesn't really like he makes it seem like he's not doing his usual gliss where he's glissing down a note, but he's using his fingers to kind of fall down. And you've probably heard it a couple times already in some of the other examples, but I just wanted to kind of bring it out of how he uses this technique to get from one note to another versus just playing that note, right? So let me play you an example of what he does. So he does this thing. Instead of doing, you hear the difference? So he's letting the notes slide, fall down. Not. He uses that throughout this whole tune. Every time he comes back to that phrase, he plays that. So here's a moment of him using the fall to kind of lead to a final note. Right there. That's that moment. He goes, he falls into that note. He falls in between notes. It's sometimes between the A and the D of the alto saxophone. And then at the end of that final phrase. So that's something he uses, is not just going straight from one note to the next. He'll take one note and then he'll fall to the next note. So that was another technique that he used. Now let's talk about what is quintessentially known as Johnny Hodges' techniques, is his bends, his slides, his scoops, and whatever you want to call it. But basically, he doesn't start the note right on the note. He either bends up to it, slides down to it, or in some cases, hits the notes and bends it down and then back up. So let's hear some of those examples of him using that technique. Right there. That's an example of him hitting the note, bending down, and then getting back up. Let's listen to that one more time. So he hits that note, bends it down, and then comes back up. That's what he's doing. He's hitting the note, bending it down, and getting back up. The way you do that technique is taking your embouchure and then just opening your mouth a little bit. I'm going to over accentuate it just so you can see, but this is not what he's really doing, but because he doesn't overdo it, but I'm going to over accentuate it. So it's better to go over when you're learning so that you can see what it feels like. And then once you learn how to do that, then you can bring it down a little bit. I'm going to over accentuate it right now. But he keeps it, he's more subtle. So once you figure out how that feels like for you, then you can make it a little bit more subtle. So that's the first technique, is the bend, where he hits the note, bends it down, and it goes straight. That's something he uses sparingly in this tune. And in that moment you just heard, that's kind of a little bit more of a slide, where he doesn't hit the note right at the beginning of the note, but he slides into it. He slides into it. He slides up into that note. And the way you do that is you, kind of with the bend, you, instead of starting with your embouchure set at the beginning of the note, you start at the bottom of the bend and then you slide up to it. And I'm going to over accentuate it just kind of like previously. So you're hitting, you start at the bottom of that, of the bend of this, the scoop, and you have your mouth open, and then you bend up to it. So that's what he kind of does to accentuate certain notes. He does it multiple times. Here's another moment where he does it. So he starts below, but this technique of scooping into the note can be done in two different ways. You can either start with the note with your embouchure more wide and scooping into that note, or you can do a combo of what I think he kind of does, is playing using a portion of fingers and embouchure. So that higher note where he goes up to the C, I'm pretty sure he uses a combination of finger and embouchure. Versus, oops. So you can use the finger. So I'm hitting the A, and then I'm scooping up to the C. So that's another way to do that scooping technique. And he does this throughout the tune, accentuating certain notes. So little bends like that. So now, this is another moment where he kind of does his technique where he'll kind of hit, where he's going up in half steps, and he'll really accentuate each half step going up by bending into it. Do you hear that? So right? Is that note? Yeah. So that's one of the techniques that he definitely uses. But one final technique, and he doesn't use it that often in this tune, but I feel like it is a quintessential Johnny Hodges tune, is what I like to call the belly gliss. What is the belly gliss? Let me show you an example. Do you hear it? Do you hear it though? You hear the difference? Let me play it one more time. Now, what makes this gliss a little different than the others, and the reason why I call it the belly gliss, is because he'll hit a note on the mid-range or the lower range of the horn, and then he'll use it as a jumping off start, as a jumping off point to get to the higher note. He doesn't just slide into the note. So that one he's sliding into the B flat. He doesn't go, but he hits the D going up to the B flat. And he's using a combination of fingers and embouchure and possibly maybe voicing to get up to that note. You hear the difference between and so let's listen to that one more time. You hear that bottom note? So that is a technique that he kind of uses in other ballads and as well as in this ballad. He doesn't do it all over the place in the ballad. This is kind of special for that one moment. And I find that to be one of his quintessential things because he uses that large gliss where he likes the gliss where it seems like he's glissing for like a whole octave. So I call it the belly gliss, and it's one of those techniques where you start, at least on this note, you start on the D, all fingers down, and then you use your fingers and your mouth to gliss up to that B flat. So that's the belly gliss. Now, I just want to play this moment because I just think it is such a great moment of Johnny Hodges' solo. He has a short little solo. It doesn't last too long in this tune, but I just love it because let me just play for you and just hear how he chooses to end his solo. Let me play that for you real quick. What a great moment. The band stops playing and he just plays quarter notes to just lead us back into the top of the tune. I mean, it is so great. He just sits back on the time. He lays back. It's not rushed. It's not notey. It's just da, 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 da. So that end of that solo, he's not rushed one bit. I mean, I just love that moment. Let's listen to it one more time. I mean, it's great. That's great. Just the way it's, you know, sometimes when horn players get a break, they fill all the space with as many notes as possible, but not Johnny Hodges. He just plays 4 notes. That's it. That's the end of his solo. It's so good. But that's the end of this video. That's the end of my kind of discussion around Isfahan and Johnny Hodges' performance around this tune. I love this tune so much because Johnny Hodges doesn't just play the notes and play the rhythms in this specific manner. He embellishes them. He makes it his own. He puts his own touch to it. And whenever you hear this tune, you know that immediately that's Johnny Hodges. He embellishes it his way. He adds his tone. He adds his timbre. He adds his elegance to it. And it's just a beautiful tune. If you're a musician, there's just so much to learn from this tune. If a saxophonist, of how to figure out how to play ballads, how to embellish melodies, how to find ways to make it your own. And that's what I love about this tune and this performance. It's one of the greats of Johnny Hodges' career, and I always revisit it, and I'm always struck in awe of how amazing it is. If you're just a casual listener, hopefully you'll go back to the tune and you'll hear something a little different this next time around. You know a little bit more of the historical context around the tune, and you'll also know a little bit more about how Johnny Hodges and the band performs this tune. But that's the end of this video. If you liked what you saw, please give this video a like. And if you'd like to see more videos of me talking about music, saxophone, a little bit about the history of the saxophone and history of the music around the saxophone, click that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment for future video ideas. If you would like me to talk about a different tune, if you'd like me to break down how to perform some of Johnny Hodges' techniques in a separate video, please let me know down in that comment box down below. And I have linked all the sources that I use to get a lot of the information on the history of this tune down below as well. But that's the end of my video. Thank you so much for joining, and YouTube will recommend a video over here. Hopefully you like it, and we'll see you next time.